She's in there again. Please, don't turn off the light. She's afraid of the dark in the greenhouse. The housekeeper's voice trembled and dissolved into the silence of the enormous house on the hill above Seoul. Beyond the tall windows, it was already growing dark, and below, in the far wing of the mansion, behind the clouded glass of the old greenhouse, a small girl sat on the cold earth and stared at a dead flower. She was 5. Kang Miso sat with her knees wrapped in her arms, in front of a dry stalk in a large ceramic pot. Once this plant had been alive, with deep green leaves and a tight bud at its crown, ready to open at any moment. Her mother had said this flower blooms only at night, only once, and that it was the most patient flower in the world. "It will wait," her mother used to say. "It will bloom when I come home." Her mother never came home, and the flower dried up. But Miso came every day. She sat on the earth before the dry stalk and waited. She watered it from a little can, though the water just sank into the dead soil. She whispered to it, her small palm pressed to the pot. She waited for a bud that no longer existed, because she believed if the flower bloomed, it meant her mother was coming back. One day, a single dry leaf broke off and fell to the ground. Miso picked it up with trembling fingers and tried to press it back onto the stalk. It wouldn't hold. She tried again. The leaf fell once more. And then, the girl who had not said a word in 4 months suddenly screamed. No words, just a high, thin, terrible cry that made the housekeeper's knees buckle. She swept the empty pots off a shelf. They shattered across the tiled floor in clay fragments, and she fell face down into her hands, and her thin shoulders shook. Upstairs, at the door of the room he no longer entered, Kang Tae-hyun stood and could not take a single step. He built shopping centers and residential towers across Asia. His signature on a contract was worth more than some people earn in a lifetime. He knew how to rescue deals everyone else had declared dead, to lead negotiations that seemed to have no way out. And he found one. In his world, there was no problem without a solution. But every time his daughter lifted her dark eyes, full of silence, Kang Tae-hyun felt the ground go out from under him. Because in those eyes was a question he had no answer to. Where is Mommy? And why won't the flower bloom? He thought he had tried everything. Child psychologists, play therapists, specialists from overseas, 13 of them in 4 months. Each promised results, each left with nothing. He was wrong to think he had tried everything, because at that very moment, at the gates of the mansion on the hill, stood a young woman from Nigeria. She hadn't brought medicine. She hadn't brought foreign methods or clever tests. She had brought a small case of seeds, secateurs wrapped in canvas, and soil under her fingernails, the soil of someone who knows how to bring back to life what everyone else has already buried. Before we go on, I have one simple question for you. If you could bring back just one living thing from your past, whole and green and breathing the way it used to be, what would it be? Tell me in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. If you love warm Afro-Korean stories about love, family, loss, and second chances, welcome. Don't forget to subscribe, because this story might stay with you long after it ends. And now, let's begin. Amara Okonkwo received the message 3 days before she first climbed the hill above Seoul. She was sitting in her small greenhouse in the old part of the city, a place that smelled of damp earth, greenery, and cold tea, carefully repotting a rare fern when her phone buzzed. Her mentor, Professor So, the only person in this country who had known her since she was a student, wrote short and to the point. "There's a job. The Kang family. Take it." Amara knew the name. All of Seoul knew it. Kang Tae-hyun, a developer whose glass towers rose in a dozen cities. A man they wrote about in business magazines. always with that particular tone people use for those they slightly fear. She called back. "The house on the hill," Professor So said. "There's an old greenhouse the owner wants either restored or torn down. If you take it seriously, it's several months of work." "Why me? He has the money for a whole crew of gardeners." Professor So was quiet for a moment. "Because there's a child there." And he told her about the developer's wife, Yuna, a woman who, they said, had built that greenhouse with her own hands, turning a cold mansion into a living place. About a car on a wet highway 4 months ago. About a girl of 5 who hadn't spoken a word since that day, and who sat every day in the dead greenhouse before a withered flower, waiting for it to bloom. "She doesn't need a gardener, Amara," the old man said. "She needs someone who knows how to bring back to life what everyone else has already buried. You understand what I mean." She understood. That was exactly what she had done all her life. "I'll take it." "There's one more thing," Professor So sighed. "Kang Tae-hyun is a difficult man. He's already sent away 13 specialists. He's not used to being told no. If you do something wrong, he'll crush your reputation with a single phone call." "Then I'll do everything right." "I'm serious, Amara." "So am I. I don't take a job for the sake of my reputation. I take it because someone needs help. If he wants a servant who'll bow to his every word, let him look elsewhere. If he wants someone who will actually help his daughter, I'm available." There was silence on the line. "That's exactly what I was afraid you'd say." 3 days later, Amara stood at the gates of the Kang estate. The guard examined her documents so long and so carefully, you'd think she was applying to a secret laboratory. When he finally waved her through, she walked up a driveway so long it felt like a separate journey. The house rose ahead, beautiful and cold. More museum than home. A butler met her at the door, his face perfectly polite. And behind that politeness, a kind of exhaustion. The particular exhaustion that builds up when, day after day, you watch a family fall apart. "Ms. Okonkwo, my name is Jung. Mr. Kang is expecting you." She followed him through halls that echoed with emptiness. No photographs on the walls, no flowers, no sign that a child lived here. Only expensive furniture and a heavy silence. And, Amara noticed at once with a professional eye, dead plants everywhere. A withered palm in a planter by the stairs, a blackened ficus by the window, empty pots on the sills. Someone had loved this house and filled it with green. And someone had stopped caring for it a long time ago. They stopped at a study door. The butler knocked once. "Come in." The voice was cold, level, accustomed to obedience. Kang Tae-hyun stood by the window, his back to the door. He didn't turn around. "You're the plant specialist from Professor So?" "Yes, Amara Okonkwo. I had my people look into you. Botany at Ibadan, then an internship at the Royal Botanic Gardens in London. 8 years of practice. You restore plants everyone considers hopeless." He turned. "An impressive resume. But a resume won't revive a dead garden." Amara met his gaze without looking away. He was taller than she'd expected. Sharp features, dark eyes that gave away nothing. Handsome in that severe way statues are, the ones carved out of ice. But beneath the cold, she saw something else. Exhaustion, desperation. A man stretched to his breaking point. "A resume won't," she said calmly. "I revive dead gardens." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, irritation, she couldn't tell. "The greenhouse in the West Wing," he said. "I want you to assess it and tell me what can be saved and what needs to be uprooted and hauled away. Work wherever you like, but there's one rule." He paused. You do not go near my daughter. She spends a great deal of time in there. If she comes in while you're working, you do not touch her, and you do not speak to her." Amara tilted her head slightly. "May I ask why?" "Because I say so." "All right. But if the child comes to me herself, I won't send her away. I don't know how to send children away." The temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. "Ms. Okonkwo, I hired you to deal with plants, not to raise my daughter." "And I'm not going to raise her. I just won't pretend she isn't there. Those are different things." He looked at her with a cold, unmoving gaze. Most people in her place would have apologized, backed down. Amara simply waited. "You're very direct," he said at last. "I've been told." "Most people don't speak to me this way." "Maybe that's part of the problem." Something shifted in his face. He turned back to the window. The conversation was over, without a word. But she had understood the important thing. Kang Tae-hyun was mourning more than his wife. He was running from his own grief, burying himself in work so he wouldn't have to feel anything. And his daughter was not the only one in this house who needed healing. The greenhouse met her with the smell of dry earth and stopped time. Once it had been a beautiful place, a glass dome, tall shelves, an old cast-iron watering can by the entrance. Now everything was dead. Browned ferns, shed orchids, climbing vines turned to dry whips. Someone had created this garden with love. Amara could see it in the thoughtful layout, the rare varieties, the little labels with names written in a neat woman's hand. And someone had left it to die the day they died themselves. And in the far corner, on the cold earth, sat a small figure. Kang Miso sat with her knees wrapped in her arms, before a large ceramic pot in which a single dry stalk stood. She didn't lift her head. She hugged a plush rabbit to her chest like a shield. Beside her stood a young nanny, wringing her hands. "She won't come out," the nanny whispered. "She's been here since morning. She won't eat, won't drink. She won't let anyone near her." Amara nodded. "You can go. I'll stay." "Will she be safe with you?" "With me, yes." The nanny hesitated, then bowed and left quietly. Amara did not approach the girl. Instead, she sat down on the earth a few meters away, crossed her legs, relaxed, and began to examine the nearest shelf. She took a small trowel from her case and began, slowly, calmly, to loosen the soil in one of the dead pots, as if there were no one in the greenhouse but her and the plants. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. Miso didn't move, didn't lift her eyes. She simply sat before her dry stalk, a tiny bundle of grief. Amara stayed calm, patient, focused. She had long ago understood, wounded children don't need methods and strategies. They need safety. They need someone who asks nothing of them. 20 minutes. 30. At last, Miso raised her head a little, just enough to glance at the stranger in the corner. Amara gave no reaction, didn't smile, didn't wave. She simply went on carefully loosening the soil. And then, very quietly under her breath, she began to hum. Not a song, just a melody, old, slow, wordless. The one her grandmother used to hum to her in Enugu when the world felt too big and too frightening. Under the glass dome, the melody filled the space like warm water, gentle and safe. The trembling in Miso's shoulders stilled. Her breathing changed. She was listening. That was enough for one day. Amara stopped humming and let the silence return on its own. Then, without looking at the girl, she stood, went to the door, and left. In the hallway, Butler Young was waiting. How did it go? She raised her head. His eyes widened. She hasn't done that for anyone. It's a beginning. A week passed, and everything began to change. Slowly, the way a folded leaf opens in the sun. Amara came every morning. Butler Young met her at the door, led her to the greenhouse, and she worked, cutting away the dead, saving what could still be saved, checking roots, changing soil. The work was slow and honest, and Amara loved it precisely for that. A garden cannot be rushed. It comes back to life exactly when it's ready. And Miso came and watched. At first, she just sat in her corner by the dead flower. Then she sat closer. Then very close, so their shoulders almost touched. But she didn't look at Amara, just hugged her plush rabbit and listened to her hum. On the fourth day, in the middle of the melody, a small, cold hand slipped into Amara's palm, trembling slightly, holding on as if to a lifeline. Amara went on humming. She didn't look down, gave no reaction, simply held the small hand gently and let the music go on. When the session ended, Miso didn't let go right away. She held on for a whole minute more, then released her and went back to her dry stalk. One day, Amara brought a small box from her own greenhouse, with damp earth, tiny trowels, and a handful of seeds, and set it beside the girl without a word. Miso stared at it a long time. Then she looked inside. Then she looked up at Amara. For the first time, her eyes held not silence, but a question. May I? Amara nodded, and the girl who for 4 months had only waited for a dead flower planted a seed for the first time in her life, with her own hands. She pressed it into the warm soil, watered it from the little can, laid her palm against the pot. Amara didn't correct her. She simply stayed near. And day by day, Miso ate better, slept sounder, and more often fell asleep not in the cold greenhouse by the dry stalk, but here, by the shelf, among the smell of damp earth, under the quiet melody from a nugu. Kang Taehyun began coming to the greenhouse, first to the threshold, as his daughter once had, then across it. He would sit off to the side, silent, watching his girl and this stranger, bent over the earth, living in a world he'd had no way into for 4 months. Sit closer, Amara said one day, without turning. Don't say anything. Just be here. He sat. Miso tensed when her father came near, but Amara handed the girl a trowel, and her attention returned to the earth. And a few minutes later, the little one leaned her shoulder against her father's arm without noticing. Kang Taehyun froze, afraid to break the spell. Then, very carefully, barely breathing, he laid a hand on his daughter's head. Miso didn't pull away. He lifted his eyes to Amara, and in them stood tears he wouldn't let himself shed. I haven't touched her in 4 months, he whispered later, walking her to her car. Every time I tried, she pulled away. I think she blamed me for not bringing her mother back. She doesn't understand what death is, Amara said softly. She only knows that something died. And you're the one who fixes everything in the world, except this. Kang Taehyun looked at her for a long moment. How do you know these things? Amara leaned against the car door. When I was 7, my father was gone. The world felt switched off. My grandmother took me in. She had a nursery, a small one, behind the house, full of rare plants she'd gathered from all over the country. She'd sit me beside her and put a seed in my hand. And she said that grief is like winter. It seems everything has died forever. But under the ground, What will wake in spring is already sleeping. You just mustn't throw out the soil too early, and you must keep watering. She paused. When my grandmother died, I nearly lost myself. But her garden saved me. Every time I plant something living, I feel her near. That's why I do this work. Because I know what it's like when everything inside has died. And I know what it's like when it sprouts again. Kang Tae-hyun was silent. Then he said, "And did it sprout in the end?" "In the end, yes. It took years, and the pain never fully went away. But it changed. It became something you carry with you, instead of something that crushes you." He looked off to the side. "I couldn't carry it. All this time I've been running from it." "I know," Amara said. "It's obvious to someone who's done the same thing." A moment between them turned into something new. Understanding. Recognition. "I need to get better," he said quietly. "For Miso. And for yourself, too. She needs a father who knows how to feel, not just one who provides." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "That's the second time you've lectured me on parenting. And I'll keep doing it until it works." Meanwhile, in another part of Seoul, someone else was thinking about Amara Okonkwo. Park Yesol sat in her apartment scrolling through photographs on her phone. The house on the hill, Amara arriving in the morning, Amara leaving in the evening, Kang Tae-hyun walking her to her car. Yesol had known Tae-hyun since childhood. Their families had been close for decades. Everyone had long decided the two of them would marry sooner or later, until Yuna came along. Beautiful, strange, free Yuna, who took Tae-hyun's heart before Yesol ever had a chance. She had waited through their entire marriage, telling herself that one day he would see his mistake. Then Yuna died, and Yesol began to wait again. She took the convenient place beside him, the caring family friend, the reliable shoulder. She had been so close. And now this woman, this foreigner, this nobody from nowhere, who walked into the Kang house as if she belonged there, making the girl smile, making Taehyun smile, taking everything Yesol had waited years for. She set the phone down. She needed to learn more about Amara Okonkwo. Everyone has a weak spot. Everyone has a past. A month passed, and one day Miso led Amara to the dead flower. In all that time, the girl had never once led Amara near the ceramic pot in the corner. It was her place, her waiting, her mother. But that day, Miso took Amara by the hand, led her to the dry stalk, and pointed at it. And then, for the first time, she spoke a word. Quiet, hoarse, unused to air. "Mommy's." Amara's heart clenched. "This is Mommy's flower?" The girl nodded, and, stumbling, in a whisper, she formed her first sentence in 4 months. "Mommy said it will bloom when she comes home." Amara knelt beside the pot. She carefully parted the dry soil with her fingers and went still. Beneath the dead surface, deep down, the root was still alive. Firm, pale, breathing. This plant hadn't died. It was sleeping. And then she saw the label. A small one, pressed into the soil at the edge of the pot, in a neat woman's hand. The variety's name in Latin, and below it, in tiny letters, the name of the nursery the seed had come from. Amara knew that nursery. It was her grandmother's nursery, in Enugu. Small, almost unknown, closed 10 years ago. And this variety, a rare night lily that blooms once every few years for a single night, was her grandmother's favorite. The very one her grandmother had painstakingly bred over years and sent out to rare orders in a handful of envelopes all over the world. Amara sank back on her heels. Her hands were shaking. That evening, she found Kang Tae-hyun in his study. "I need to show you something." She told him about her grandmother, about the nursery, about the label in the pot. Kang Tae-hyun was silent for a long time. Then he stood, went to a cabinet, took out a wooden box, and came back. Inside were letters. Old ones, tied with a ribbon. "Yuna found this variety online a year before Miso was born," he said hollowly. "She was looking for the most patient plant in the world," that's how she put it. She ordered seeds from some small nursery in Nigeria and corresponded with a woman there for almost a year, asking how to care for it, what to water it with, how to wait for it to bloom. He lifted his eyes. She used to say the woman from the nursery had saved not her plant, but her faith. That somewhere there was a person she would never see, but to whom she owed a debt. He untied the ribbon and handed Amara the top letter. Amara knew the handwriting from the first line. The slant of the letters, the tiny dot in the center of every loop, the line under important words. She had seen it 1,000 times as a child. It was her grandmother's handwriting. "That woman was my grandmother," Amara whispered. They looked at each other. "How is this possible?" she asked quietly. "I don't know." Taehyun's voice was strained. "Yuna loved finding forgotten things. She said things everyone else threw away have more soul than new ones. She found your grandmother's garden. She grew this flower from her seed. And every evening she brought Miso here and promised her it would bloom one day. And now, by a coincidence I can't explain, you're standing in my house, and it was your grandmother who grew the seed my daughter is waiting for." Amara's head was spinning. It couldn't be a coincidence. Too precise. Too perfect. But what else could it be? "Mr. Kang, I swear to you, I didn't know. I didn't know your wife existed until I took this job." "I believe you." His voice softened. "Yuna believed in fate. She said there are no coincidences, that the world sends us exactly the people we need, exactly when we need them." "And did you believe her?" "I believed in calculations, in loads, in blueprints, in what can be measured." He looked out the window. "But standing here, knowing what I now know, I no longer understand what to believe." Amara had no answer. But she had a feeling that she'd ended up exactly where she was meant to be. And that somehow, some way, Yuna had known. After that, something in the house shifted for good. Amara knew the flower's root was alive, and if she worked patiently, changing the soil, nursing the root, waiting for the right temperature and humidity, the plant could be woken. It could bloom again. It could give the girl the very sign she had been waiting for. But she didn't promise Miso it would bloom. That would have been cruel. Instead, she said, "We'll take care of it together, every day. And we'll wait. Whether it blooms or not, the flower will decide when it's ready. Our job is not to give up on it." And the girl nodded, as if she understood something bigger than the words. Miso began to speak. First, one word at a time. Then, fragments of sentences. She tugged Amara by the hand through the greenhouse, showed her the seeds she'd planted, demanded her attention. She began to laugh, quietly, disbelievingly, as if remembering all over again how it was done. And that laugh was like the first light of spring after a long winter. The staff couldn't believe their eyes. "She laughed today," the cook reported to the butler. "A real laugh! And she asked for seconds." "She called Ms. Okonkwo by name when she woke up," the nanny added. Butler Young allowed himself a smile. Perhaps miracles do exist after all. But it wasn't a miracle. It was patience, presence, and the quiet power of living earth. The power of hands that bring back to life what everyone else has already buried. Kang Tae-hyun was changing too. He began coming not at the end of the day, but in the middle of it. He started leaving work early. He would sit beside his daughter, and together they loosened the soil, planted, watered. Once, in the middle of the work, Miso slipped her small hand into her father's, then reached her other hand to Amara, and, for a moment, the three of them were joined by earth and silence. And that silence was whole, not broken. The goodbyes at the car grew longer. "She asked about her mother today," Taehyun said one evening. "For the first time in a long while. But differently. Not crying, just asking." "What did she ask?" "She asked whether her mother can see her from the stars." I said yes. She said, "Good. Then let Mommy know we're watering her flower." Amara's heart ached. She also said... Taehyun paused. "She wants her mother to know about you. That there's a kind lady who knows how to wake plants. That her mommy would have liked you." Amara didn't know what to say. "I think Yuna would have liked you too," he added quietly. She valued people who spoke plainly, who didn't treat her like a developer's wife. I didn't know her. You'd have understood each other." Something in his voice tightened her chest. "Taehyun, I know." He looked away. "I know it's complicated. You work for me, you're healing my daughter. There are boundaries. There are. And I respect them. But," he met her eyes, "but I can't remember the last time I looked forward to seeing someone the way I look forward to seeing you." Amara's breath caught. "I'm not asking for anything," he went on. "I'm not expecting anything. I just wanted you to know. Because for 4 months, I felt nothing. And now I feel something. And I don't want to pretend I don't." Amara was quiet for a long time. Part of her wanted to step back, to remind him of the professional boundaries, to protect herself. But another part understood him too well, because she felt the same. "Thank you for being honest," she said finally. "And I'll be honest too. I feel something as well. I don't yet know what it is, and I'm not ready to name it. But it's there." "So, what do we do?" he asked. "We focus on Miso. I'm here for her. That has to stay the priority." "Agreed." "And we don't rush. We don't make decisions on emotion alone. We give it time." "How much time?" "As much as it needs." He nodded slowly. "I can wait. For 4 months, I felt nothing at all. I can wait longer. For something real." Amara smiled softly. "That's the most patient thing I've heard you say." "Don't get used to it." A few days later, Yisol came to the estate uninvited. The butler showed her into the east sitting room and then, with visible reluctance, told Amara that a guest wished to see her. Yisol was elegant in that careless way that knows its own worth. Designer dress, flawless makeup, beauty perfectly aware of its own price. She smiled when Amara came in, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Ms. Okonkwo, thank you for making time. I wasn't aware we had a meeting. Consider it an informal chat, woman to woman. Yasol gestured to a chair. I wanted to thank you for your work with little Miso. The family has been through so much. It's wonderful to see the girl doing better. Thank you. You've clearly built a beautiful bond with her. And with Taehyun too, I hear. Amara kept her face calm. Mr. Kang and I work together, for his daughter's sake. Of course, of course. Yesel tilted her head slightly. I just like everyone's intentions to be clear. Taehyun is very vulnerable right now. He lost his wife. It would be very easy for someone to take advantage of that. Amara felt anger rise in her, but her voice stayed level. I'm not taking advantage of anyone. I'm doing my job. Jobs end, Ms. Okonkwo. Contracts get terminated. People get replaced. And there are those who've known this family for years, who are here not for money. Is that a threat, Ms. Park? Yesel smiled. Friendly advice. It would be a shame if some stranger disturbed a fragile balance. Amara stood. Thank you for the advice, but I don't make decisions under pressure. Not friendly pressure, not any other kind. She turned toward the door. Ms. Okonkwo, everyone has a past. I'm very good at finding it. Amara turned and looked her straight in the eye. Find whatever you like. I have nothing to hide. She left, but the conversation left a residue. Someone was watching, waiting, hunting for a weak spot. The question was what that someone would do once they found none. That same evening, Amara told Taehyun about the visit. They stood in the garden, their usual place for talks at the end of the day. Yesel came to see you? His face darkened. She wanted me to understand my place. Taehyun was quiet a moment. Yesel and I have known each other since childhood. Our families always assumed we'd end up together. But I met Yuna, and everything changed. Yesel never let go. And after Yuna died, she began to wait again. And you? Are you ready to move on? He looked at her. I'm beginning to understand what that might mean. They stood in silence. The night was cool, stars scattered across the sky. Miso watered the flower herself today, Taehyun said suddenly. She didn't cry. She just watered it and said, grow when you're ready. For the first time, she didn't demand that it bloom right now. She's learned to wait without fear. Tears rose in Amara's eyes. That's what healing is, she said. Not when the pain goes away, but when you stop being afraid to wait. 2 more months passed. Amara's official work in the greenhouse was drawing to a close. The garden had come alive. Green returned to the shelves, the orchids sent up new spikes, the climbing vines reached again for the glass dome. But the night lily in the ceramic pot was still silent. The root was alive, the leaf had risen, the stalk had grown strong. But there was no bud. And Amara didn't rush it. She prepared Miso for the end of her work. Not because the girl was fully healed, healing is never complete, but because Miso now had her own hands, her own earth, her own bond with her father, and her own ability to wait without fear. Will you keep coming? Miso asked on the last official day, her lower lip trembling. I promise. Every week, as often as I can. And we'll water Mommy's flower? Always. The girl threw her arms around her, tight, with all her strength. I love you, Amara. I love you too, little one. And then, that evening, something real took shape for good between Amara and Taehyun. Not rushed, not forced. It simply was. "I've been thinking," she said as he walked her out, "and I think I'm ready to see where this goes." His face softened. "Slowly," she added. "Properly. No rushing." "Slowly, properly. I can do that." The next few months unfolded like a garden finding its bloom. There were dinners, quiet conversations, walks through Seoul as spring turned to summer. There were visits to the estate, where Miso would drag Amara to see her new sprouts and give detailed reports on the adventures of her plush rabbit, Tori. There was the meeting with Taehyun's family. His grandmother, Madame Kang, turned out to be exactly as terrifying as promised. For the first 30 minutes, she studied Amara like a specimen under a microscope. Then she said, "You have a spine. Good. This family needs more spine. And you brought my daughter-in-law's greenhouse back to life. For that alone, I'm more grateful to you than for anything else." And Yesul didn't vanish quietly. She dropped pointed remarks at parties, spread whispers about the foreigner. But the whispers found no purchase, because everyone who met Amara saw what Taehyun saw: warmth, intelligence, genuine care. The gossip died on its own. In the end, Yesul conceded defeat and stopped appearing at family gatherings. And then came that night. It was midsummer, the shortest warm night of the year. Amara had stayed late at the estate. She and Taehyun were sitting in the garden, and Miso had long been asleep. And suddenly, from the greenhouse, came a soft sound like a sigh. Amara went still. She knew that scent. Faint, sweet, nocturnal. She seized Taehyun's hand and almost ran, pulling him toward the greenhouse. The ceramic pot in the corner glowed in the dark. The night lily was opening, slowly, petal by petal, white and perfect, releasing into the warm air its single scent of several years. Her grandmother's flower. Yuna's flower. The flower a little girl had waited for through 4 long months. "Miso," Taehyun whispered, his voice breaking. "We have to wake Miso." He ran upstairs, and a minute later, he carried the sleepy girl down in his arms. Miso opened her eyes, saw the opening flower, and her whole small body went still. "It bloomed," she whispered. She slid down from her father's arms, went to the pot, and knelt before it, staring wide-eyed at the white petals. Tears ran down her cheeks, but not the screaming, uncontrollable tears from before. Something softer. Something that had been locked inside for so long finally found its way out. "Mommy," the girl said quietly to the flower, "you came back." Amara knelt beside her. She didn't wipe the girl's tears. She didn't try to fix anything. She simply stayed present. "Do you know what this means?" she asked softly. "Mommy isn't coming back into this flower. She stayed in it, all this time. She's in the soil your mommy touched with her hands, in the seed she planted, in the scent you're breathing right now. She never went anywhere, little one. She just waited with the flower until you were ready to see it." Miso nodded, slowly, as if she understood something very big. Then she leaned into Amara, and with her other hand, she reached for her father. And the three of them knelt in the warm night darkness before a single white flower. And somewhere among the stars, a woman who had loved them all smiled. A year later, Taehyun brought Amara to the greenhouse, to the place where it all began. The night lily was preparing to bloom again. He held a small box in his hands. "I have something for you." Amara's heart stopped. "The ring belonged to Yuna's mother," he said quietly, opening the box. "Yuna once told me, if you ever love again, and she always believed I would, Give this ring to that woman. And don't be stubborn about it. Don't wait too long. Like the flower, it waits exactly as long as it must, but no longer. Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks. Taehyun went down on one knee. Amara Okonkwo, you came into our house with a case of seeds and soil under your fingernails. You woke my daughter. You woke me. You brought life back into a house I had left to die. He looked into her eyes. I'm not asking you to replace anyone.
Yuna will always be part of our family. But I'm asking you to be part of it too. Fully. Permanently. Yes, she whispered. Yes. To all of it. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. And then he kissed her. Finally. Truly. Completely. Beneath the white flower opening once more in the warm night. The wedding was held in the garden a year later. Small, only for the people who truly mattered. Miso, now 7, carried the rings, with the seriousness of a person performing a task of national importance, and with the plush rabbit Tori in the pocket of her fancy dress. And in the corner of the greenhouse, in a ceramic pot with a small label written in a neat woman's hand, a white night lily bloomed. It would bloom every summer. Always. Years passed. Miso grew, started school, made friends, learned to nurse rare plants herself. Every evening before bed, she went to her mother's flower, pressed her palm to the warm soil, and whispered, "Good night, Mommy. We're growing." Yuna never left the family. She lived in the photographs that reappeared on the walls, in the letters tied with a ribbon, in the grandmother's garden that bound them all together. When Miso was 9, Amara sat her down beside her. "I have some news. You're going to be a big sister." Miso screamed so loudly, the butler Jung came running from the far wing of the house. The baby came on a warm summer morning, on that same short night when the night lily bloomed. Bright eyes and, according to the nurses, already stubborn. They named her Yuna, a quiet nod to the one who had given the family its first seed. That night, Taehyun found his older daughter asleep on the greenhouse floor, beside the crib they had carried out there for one night. One hand rested on the railing, and the plush rabbit Tori was propped against the bars, on guard. Nearby, in the ceramic pot, a white lily glowed in the dark. Taehyun stood in the doorway beside Amara and put his arm around her shoulders. "A year ago, I was losing my daughter," he said quietly. "I was losing myself." "And now?" He looked at the sleeping children, at the blooming lily, then at her. "Now I have a whole garden." Amara leaned into him and looked up through the glass dome at the stars. Somewhere out there, Yuna was watching them. Not with sorrow, with peace. Her flower had bloomed. Her house was alive again. Her garden was breathing. And it would breathe forever.